Day 3 of the Vallow Daybell trial in the so-called Doomsday Mom continues to cross-examine witnesses. An intense day in the courtroom with the fiery Vallow Daybell becoming argumentative at times as prosecutors object to her line of questioning. Another key witness taking the stand, a woman who spent time with Lori's then husband Charles Vallow the night before he was shot and killed by Lori's brother. I'm Justin Lum, and we are on the record. A contentious day in the courtroom on behalf of Vallow Daybell, caused by her questioning today. We had objections upon objections for being argumentative, even harassment. Let's talk about Nancy Jo Hancock. Coming into this, we really didn't know much, except this was someone that had been in touch and in contact with Charles Vallow before he was shot and killed.
Yeah, this was, in theory, the last woman to see him alive. At least that's still here, except for maybe Lori. We learned how they met, right? We learned they met on a dating site. We learned that they had exchanged messages, had agreed to go on a date the night before. She went into some detail about how Charles described his life. She knew a little bit about what he did. She knew a little bit about his current marriage.
Personal, yeah.
Yeah. I was surprised at how much she described that Charles had opened up to her about what was going on in his life, but also surprised that she described Charles as someone who portrayed Lori as a fine person, nice woman.
Yeah, cared about her. And as far as Charles, he's chivalrous and a gentleman. And this is strange territory. So let's take everyone back to this time. This is July 10th, 2019. Charles Vallow and Nancy Jo Hancock meet for a date at the Keg in Santan Valley. For people who don't know where that is, obviously Far East Valley. And they have met on this sort of dating site, I guess, for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But for Charles, it's complicated. He's estranged from his wife. He's been living in Houston, Texas. He just started to reconcile the relationship and figure out navigating what is going on between him and Lori Vallow, who's taking care of JJ Vallow, and she has Tylee Ryan, and they're staying in this Chandler home that they're renting. They had previously lived in Gilbert as early as January 2019, and that's when things get bad, because Lori Vallow's beliefs are about the end of times, who she is as a light spirit, and who she is in her past life. And the jury doesn't know this, but she's already in a full-on affair with Chad Daybell. Charles doesn't really find this out until late June that she's having this affair, but he's confused. He says he's been threatened by her. He's worried that Lori and Alex are going to harm him, and he has a life insurance policy that he has changed as the beneficiary to his sister, Kay Woodcock. So even though this lady seems like a stranger, Nancy Jo, she actually knew a lot at the time.
She did, and when you go on a first date with someone, that's a lot to kind of soak in.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they clearly had a lot to talk about. She was, nice enough to listen. She even said after dinner they went out and talked next to her truck.
45 minutes, right?
Yeah, in the parking lot. And so clearly he opened up to her quite a bit. And then again, he was describing how excited he was to be in town to go pick up JJ the next morning. By all accounts, he seemed like he was in a pretty good mood that night.
And Nancy Jo got a little bit emotional, or you could see that human nature come out when she talked about how happy Charles was to see his son, his adoptive son, 7-year-old JJ Vallow, who has special needs. He had autism, and he was going to pick him up the next day, the next morning early, and take him to school. That was the plan. He had a rental car and everything. And we know through this testimony, we know through this trial already that Lori Vallow Daybell had booked Charles a hotel that night. She's telling the jury in opening statements on Monday that things were so bad, the family dynamic between him and Tylee, that she couldn't have him in the same home, even though he's paying the rent. But things were bad, and he had to stay at a hotel. So just definitely at this point in time in July 2019, things are coming to a head. And Lori Vallow Daybell even says that via text message to Alex Cox, hence why he is there that morning. So there's a lot to unpack. And then the advice that Nancy gave Charles is to change the or not change the beneficiary, but let Lori know that you have changed the beneficiary. What do we think that would have done, though? I mean,
Well, as we will
to
probably
notify
learn.
her.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously angered and would have angered her.
Yeah.
You know, you like you
Does it
meet.
stop this violence or whatever happened on that morning? It's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell because the circumstances leading up to the shooting on that morning, I think, are still a little cloudy because we don't exactly know, other than what we've heard in some of the interrogation tapes that was that the detectives did with Alex, with Lori, with Tylee in the days following the shooting. We don't exactly know what was said in that home.
Yeah,
right?
that is the one thing I bet anyone would want to be a fly on the wall to see how did this go down. You have Lori, Charles, and Alex, Tylee. JJ at some point is put in the car, in the rental car of Charles. And then this fight happens. The baseball bat comes into play. Tylee leaves. Lori leaves. And it's just Alex and Charles. And Alex is sort of like the cleanup guy. We
Yeah.
just know the facts that he didn't call 911 for 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And first responders say it doesn't seem that any CPR was done.
Right.
Right. So we've gone into all of the nuts and bolts and the fundamentals of this crime scene. And so now we were getting this inside look at what was Charles's life and perspective going into this fateful day.
Yeah, Nancy Jo really is the first personal witness that we've had on the stand. The first kind of person who has a personal connection to the circle. It's a very small connection, mind you,
Mhm.
right? She talked to this guy for maybe a week, meets him one night, has dinner, and then never hears from him again.
And she thought that, he didn't want to talk to her.
Fair
And maybe
enough.
he would have, who knows what would have happened with their relationship, whatever that was.
And she did say that Charles had let her know that he was obviously talking to other women.
Yeah.
This was not the only woman that he was on sounds like a religious or LDS dating website. He was very forthcoming with her with all of this information, but she
Mhm.
made it a point to say she was aware that he was still married in some capacity and that he had been speaking to other women.
And still in love. And we know through family members that he loved Lori and just wanted her to get help and wanted everything to be back and happy again. So Lori gets her chance at cross-examination with Nancy Jo. And I don't think any of us expected this exchange. Let's listen to that.
So are you trying to tell me and this jury that you went on one date with my husband and he told you all the details of our lives?
I'm telling you the truth, and that's what I know.
So you spent your whole date getting to know each other, talking about me.
Don't flatter yourself. No, we did not spend the whole time talking about you.
You knew a lot about me, right?
I knew what I've testified to.
What else did you talk about on your date?
Lots of things.
Like what, for instance?
Life, kids, the church, lots of things.
Okay.
So very intense moments right there. Objections by Trina K. We heard those through the end of the morning or most of the morning and then into the early afternoon, continuing the cross-examination. But from this, the jury is just meeting Lori Vallow Daybell now. It's been a few days.
Yeah.
Is she showing her true colors? She's representing herself, but she's not necessarily acting like how we would expect any attorney to act as far as emotions and all that.
Yeah, and we've seen throughout this 2-3 day trial now, Lori has been warned by the judge numerous times to kind of keep some of her personal comments to herself. You'll hear her sometimes. She'll ask a question, she'll get an answer, and then she'll make maybe what she thinks is under her breath comment, but clearly we can all hear it. The judge warned her yesterday after trial. Look, you need to stop doing that. She apologized, wouldn't do it again. It happened a couple times today. He had to warn her again. This is part of it. When you bring in personal witnesses to the case, you're with Lori and obviously the defendant acting as her own attorney, you're going to get some personal interaction one way or the other. And so the jury is now seeing Lori as who she is.
Yeah.
Right. And we've had experts tell us, people who know her well, who aren't witnesses, this is who Lori is.
Yeah, we have heard the experts, people have worked on the case. narcissism.
Yeah.
That's the key word. I'm not saying it, but this is what has been said throughout coverage of this case, research of this case, those narcissistic features. And our legal experts talked to us during the lunch break, and I advise you guys to watch it. It's on our YouTube channel right now. They said there'd be no benefit to keep Nancy Jo on the stand for cross-examination. And Lori Vallow Daybell did that, and she almost opened the door to more context and details that stem back to Idaho, that could open the door to just more about, the religious beliefs, dark spirits, light spirits, the end of times. I mean, the jury is going to get introduction, and they already have gone into that spiritual realm by way of the prosecution. But what is the benefit of trying to beat up on Nancy Jo Hancock?
Yeah, this is a woman who, as we learned in her testimony today, she learned about Charles's death 5 months later when she watched it on the news. And then she talks about, she goes back on her phone and realizes, oh my God, that was the day after he and I went on a date. Like you said, she, I guess, assumed that he had ghosted her.
Yeah.
And hadn't heard from him for 5 months, only to see his face and then to learn that Lori was one of the prime suspects in his murder.
What information could she give to help Lori's defense? Like
Nothing.
Said,
and
she didn't know much because she didn't even know if she was such an integral part of Charles's life. She would find out before December 2019 that he had been shot and killed.
Yes, and as we kind of picked up on it, because Nancy Jo came on after Detective Coons this morning, was cross-examined, and then we took a lunch break.
Yeah.
And I know we were all thinking, okay, how much longer is this going to go on?
She said she had more.
You're right, and even our experts were like, no more. She's not helping you. You need to end this questioning and move on, because it's only going to make it worse. And more so, not so much the testimony would make it worse. It's the
optics.
Yes.
Of how she is interacting with her,
Right.
how she's treating her on the stand, and how she's asking her, is this normally what you do? Do you talk to married men?
Right. And Lori would give the perception of, I don't like this. And so, this woman's scorned attitude that, again, the jury is going to pick up on, and it's going to set the tone moving forward. This is the first personal witness for the state, and there's many more to come, as we know.
What would benefit her more is if in this testimony, if this was true, if Nancy said, you know what, Charles had a lot of bad things to say about her. He was openly cheating on her. We had been talking to each other for months and seeing each other and flying back and forth and things like that. I mean, that's just speculation, but hypothetically, that would make Charles then look like the villain. And then you couple that with Lori Vallow's narrative of that he was intimidating and threatening, and that was just ramping up into this July 11th day. But Nancy says that Charles had nothing but really good things to say. It was more concerns, hence the life insurance policy.
And we should, those of you watching, we've heard a lot about hearsay and why what Alex told officers and detectives would not be allowed. Charles is not under that same umbrella because he's not a co-conspirator, number one. So anything that he told Nancy Jo, fully admissible in there.
Yeah.
In court.
So later on in the day, we got to be introduced to Christina Atwood, who was part of this. And I say inner circle, but she wasn't like tight, and she wasn't at the top tier of the group, right? It sounds like a clique, but you had Lori Vallow Daybell, you had Chad Daybell, who's on death row now, and you guys know the whole backstory there in Idaho. You have Melanie Gibb, Melanie Pulowski, Lori's niece, Zulema Pastenis, and then you have other people like Christina Atwood. Serena Sharp is a witness that's going to be called. And Alex Cox, obviously being Lori's brother and the protector in this case. They had meetings.
And dating Zulema, by the way. Alex dated Zulema after
and then they get married quickly after, and then he dies.
Right.
So there's a lot there.
Yeah.
But they had this group that prayed together, and then we're going to get into the castings of dark spirits. That's what the prosecutor is going to detail. And it's good that we've gotten in the large roadmap and the preview in Idaho, Idaho trials.
Ease the jury into the religious part, because that will be, I think, one of the more confusing things for the jurors.
Yeah. So Atwood, she recalled a lot of things about how Lori had said Charles had been possessed by a dark spirit. She couldn't get the name, recall the name being Ned Schneider, that they deemed or identified Charles as. the pills being crushed and put in his drink. She said she had witnessed that. She had some concerns and issues with how Lori was acting at the time, and that sort of isolated her from the group for some time until August 2019. Let's hear Trina K question Atwood.
Had you spoken to someone who was passing along information to you of what they understood had happened?
Yes.
Okay. The shooting of Charles by Alex was about a month after you had heard him say he wanted to kill Charles, correct?
Yes.
So this is interesting to me because we know that whatever Alex Cox has said to witnesses is supposed to be just hearsay. And then here we have Christina Atwood confirming that she heard that he wanted to allegedly kill Charles long before this happened on July 11, 2019.
And when she was asked too, when she learned that Charles had been shot and killed, she heard it was his brother-in-law, but didn't make the connection until later that, wait, so it's Alex that did it. And then, of course, she remembers, she starts piecing together what was said in the months prior and everything leading up to it. And things started falling into place for her. And that's when I think she realized we have a problem. You know what I mean? That there's an issue here, and that this is no coincidence.
And then everything unfolds, and she speaks to police. I believe they say 2022 is when they talked to her and had their interview. So, you know, in this testimony, she listens to some of that police interview because she can't remember everything. Right. It's been a while, and it's very clear. I think it was an important testimony to have Atwood up there. It was underwhelming as far as we didn't get as much as we could have. We got direct exam. And then shocker of the day, even more shocking than the cross-examination, I think, is that Lori Vallow Daybell stayed quiet.
Yeah, like after all of that with Nancy Jo, here you have someone that you were closer to, clearly, that you had, you know, interactions with, and you had all these little meetings and stuff, and then all of a sudden,
your teachings and about this very bizarre stuff. And we talked to Nate Eaton with East Idaho News earlier on the phone, and he says the jurors are perking up. They're perking up now because this stuff is just out of left field. Well, and I think you have to pay attention.
We talked about how dry some of the testimony was yesterday as some of the legal stuff and some of the law enforcement witnesses kind of got their testimony out of the way. I think now, as Trina K alluded to in her opening statements at the very beginning about the religious aspect of this crime, now the jurors are starting to understand, now we see where it's going. And again, for those that were not familiar with this case to begin with, this would, I think, interest anyone. Right. I think this is a saga that we think is relatable to a lot of people. And so as a jury, not surprised that their eyes would be wide open, especially after today's testimony.
That's 7 witnesses. And Trina K, very experienced. She's put in on a master class here. She got through some of that dry testimony, technical stuff by police and fire. We'll hear more from police, and we're going to see text messages and emails. But the shooting. What happened? Why is this not self-defense? How was Charles when he was shot and killed? In what position? Indicating what the autopsy will say, and we'll get more on the autopsy from the medical examiner's office. And then now bringing in these people that were in touch with Charles, people that were talking to Lori Vallow Daybell, and showing that Alex Cox is very much an alleged co-conspirator in this. And you are going to hear Alex Cox's name a lot. And Lori can't necessarily use him at all to help her defense.
Now, this is the insight into the motive. Okay, so this is the insight into the
plan and the conspiracy,
the extreme religious beliefs, the money, right? The life insurance policy, the changing of it. Yes. So this is where we get into the motive of it. And you're going to hear a lot more about not only the religion, but the what Lori's mindset was with Charles and why she wanted to get rid of him. It was about insurance money, but I think underlying tone, you're going to hear a lot more about what she thought of him, again, regarding dark spirit names. And you may not hear about the kids, but you'll see the tone set that this was her and Chad's beliefs about a lot of people in their circle.
The team has to convince the jury that Lori was plotting this whole thing with Alex and Chad, even though Chad's not charged in this case, but that there was many communications on what they needed to do, even if it was spiritual, they had many details and talks about life insurance money. And that takes us back to the Idaho case of money, power, and sex. And then I would assume that we see the romantic text messages between Chad and Lori. Because of that motivation that we learned in Idaho of why they wanted to be together and how much they loved each other and in love with each other, the lust and all of that. And so to set up those elements for a conspiracy there, that's what Trina K is trying to do right now. Lori Vallow Daybell is representing herself. And as we know, that is a way tough task with all the evidence that we have here. She's a convicted murderer, yet the jury doesn't know that. When did they wonder, where is JJ? Where is Tylee? Where is Alex? I don't see them in the courtroom. Are the adults going to be called to testify? What happened to them?
Yeah.
She's the only one here. Charles, in the victim's case, is dead.
So an interesting week, obviously. We have one more day this week.
Yeah.
And we heard from Nate. Again, if you haven't, Nate joined us after trial today. That's on our YouTube page. Nate kind of gave us a preview of what we can maybe expect tomorrow.
Yeah, and I've talked to, Kay Woodcock and other people close to this case. And yeah, we know that at some point, maybe it's tomorrow on Thursday, last day of the week for trial, Kay Woodcock, Charles Vallow's sister, and then Adam Cox, Lori Vallow Daybell's brother. I mean, it is going to be, all eyes will be on this exchange and how Lori, if she does choose to cross-examine
I would
them,
expect so.
right? You're representing yourself.
Sure.
You're all you got, unless you want to get your attorneys involved and change your mind about all this. Kay Woodcock has been waiting for this for a long time. Adam Cox is he's in the middle of all this. His brother is dead, an alleged co-conspirator in this case, and he has a lot of insight into that family intervention that they were trying to plan to help Lori. And again, it's going to be really, really unique to see. All right, so that's our recap for the day. We can keep going and going, obviously, down this rabbit hole. There's a lot to cover, but check out our YouTube channel where we've got witness testimony, we've got our stream from the day, we've got our panel of legal experts, and shout out to Cresha Easton, Kay Woodcock's daughter, that's Charles Vallow's niece, who very insightful on the family dynamic and her frustration and anger seeing all this. I encourage you guys to watch that. We'll see you next time on The Record.